So yeah, it has. There's a point in that.
Okay, thank you.
Moshe, anything you want to say about
My pocket, if you want.
Oh,
That's what I said. Those ruins were the ruins of the temple of Seraphis, the Greek Hellenistic Roman god of medicine. And the whole complex of ruins is basically what used to be temples. Colonnades and pillars and remains of temples. Like what we saw in Caesarea Philippi. Remains of temples for pagan gods. That's it. The pool was right there in the middle, over there. In the middle. Surrounded by colonnaded areas. The
Fed
pool of
by a
water.
spring?
Fed by not by spring, by an aqueduct of water.
So that's why
Like
it's
what?
stirring
By an aqueduct
and
of water.
bubbling.
No, it was stirring and bubbling because it would feed by an aqueduct into some sort of like a hole, but whenever it would be too much pressure, the water would stir, and then when the water would clear, it will relax for a little bit, like a geyser almost.
Okay.
Almost like a geyser.
Now, what period would this have been built in again?
Hellenistic is 3rd century BC, and Roman, times of Jesus, 2,000 years ago.
So the first temple would have been up there or not?
No. No,
The
first
second-
in the Hellenistic period, there would be the first temple that was destroyed,
Right.
rebuilt by Ezra and Nehemiah, and rebuilt again by the Maccabees, by the Hashmoneans. It's like the remains of the first temple. By the way, it's a good question. We tend to speak of first temple and second temple in relations of first temple is Solomon, second temple is Herod. Actually, you could say that there were 4 temples because that first temple that was built by Solomon, destroyed by the Babylonians, was rebuilt 70 years later by Ezra and Nehemiah, who came from the exile from Babylonia. But they used the same destroyed Solomonic temple, they fixed it a little bit. And then in the 3rd century BC came the Jews who took from the Greeks, the Maccabees, and they fixed the same temple again. Herod, when he came, he made such a big change that people call it the second temple because he didn't use the mountain, he made the platform and he surrounded the whole thing and he built the whole temple area, so it's called the second temple. But it was in the renovations, it was actually 4th generation of renovating the temple. Now, we're going to start the Via Dolorosa. Our first stop is going to be the Sisters of Zion Convent, which we go underneath and go into the original street level of Jerusalem from Adrian Caesar. And I have to understand, what we see here is not Jesus' level of life. This is not what Jesus would walk in the Via Dolorosa because you don't really, that Jerusalem was covered. This Jerusalem of King Herod, of Jesus, was destroyed, as I told you, by the Romans at the year 70 and stayed in ruins. 70 years later, 135, the Jews rebelled once more against the Romans. And the Romans came again and destroyed Jerusalem the second time. This time, Adrian Caesar decided that in order to disconnect the Jews from Jerusalem and prevent them from rebelling all the time, he should go and change the whole idea about Jerusalem. He thought, why are the Jews keep fighting against the Romans again and again? Because they always have this hope that they will renew the temple and have the temple back and once again have Jerusalem as a center. If I prevent Jews from living in Jerusalem, keep the Temple Mount in ruins, plow the whole city, cover it, and rebuild it as a Roman city with 2 main streets, Cardo from south to north and secondary Cardo from east to west, and rename it and call it Ilia Capitolina, the city of the gods, and make it a pagan city, then Jews will never come back and live here again. And so that's what Adrian Caesar did. So he covered the level of Herod. He took stones from everything that was found in Jerusalem that was destroyed and rebuilt them in his streets, but he built 2 main streets, a Cardo, secondary Cardo, and lots of buildings. In the middle of the Cardo, he put a triumphal arch, like the Titus Arch in Rome, which he wrote on all his glory and what he did for Jerusalem. This was Adrian Caesar's level of Jerusalem, which we call Byzantine area, Byzantine period. The Christian Byzantine period, and then the Christians came and built churches and so on and so on. On top of that, you have another layer, which is the Muslim / Turkish / Crusader level of Jerusalem. This is where we are now. So when we stand here, we go down, we'll get to Adrian Caesar's period. We go down, at some places we'll get to Herod's period, and in some places we go down, we get to King David's period. So you have at least 4 layers of Jerusalem, one on top of the other. So when you walk here, and we say this is the Via Dolorosa, this is where Jesus carried the cross, it's not that Jesus would walk and see churches and souvenir shops and marketplaces, but he would go on the same path, more or less, but 2 levels below us. The other thing you have to remember is that, like I told you, anybody who builds the city after it was destroyed, if he finds stones or pillars or anything that he could use, he would use it, because there's no point to make new marble pieces when you have perfectly good shaped marble pieces. So you could see the same stones that were taken from the military fortress of Antonia where the soldiers were, where Jesus was tried in front of Pontius Pilate, put into the Herodian street and used as a cardo, and then put into a church that was built later and became now the floor of the church. I'll show you that stone in one of the churches, and we can see it, how it moves from place to place. Other thing about the Via Dolorosa is that this whole tradition of the 14 stations of the cross, the number 14, the fact that what happened in each station and what's the path of the Via Dolorosa, this is all traditional. It's not written in the Bible. The Bible doesn't mention the number 14. It's just a tradition about 14, because we can count 14 generations in groups of 14 generations from Adam to Jesus. So the number 14 became important in Christianity. And then the Bible tells you what happened in the crucifixion. It starts with Jesus brought to trial in front of Pontius Pilate and ends with Jesus is dead on the cross and put to burial in the tomb. Tradition divided this whole event into 14 stops and said this is what happened in each and every station. In the Byzantine period, they marked the stations. In the Crusaders period, they removed the stations a little bit and finalized them into what is known today as the Via Dolorosa. And the interesting thing is, if you take the Via Dolorosa of today, you realize that it goes through the most busy Muslim parts of town before it gets to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And the Crusaders wanted that. They wanted every Friday, when the priests have a procession of the Via Dolorosa, to walk Friday in the afternoon, when the Muslims come in out from the mosque, to walk through the heavily populated Muslim areas on the way to church. It's again one of those control games. So when we walk in the Via Dolorosa and say, we can say few stations, we can say, okay, this is where it happened. First station and second station. First is where Jesus was sentenced in front of Pontius Pilate to be crucified, and second is where Jesus was whipped. They took off his clothes, they put a purple gown on him, which is a symbol of kings, a crown of thorns on his head, humiliated him, made fun of him, made him carry the cross and start walking. Those two stations, almost sure where they are, because they were in the military courtyard of the Antonia fortress on the northern western corner of Temple Mount area, which is not far from here. That's where the church we're going to go to now was built. Last 5 stations of the cross, where Jesus was nailed to the cross, crucified, died on the cross, removed from the cross and buried, that's more or less known. That's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This was identified by Queen Helena at the 4th century. Although the Protestants don't accept that tradition and say that the crucifixion place and burial is not there, but it's outside the Damascus Gate area in a place called the Garden Tomb, where we're going to go in the afternoon, and they are going to explain to you why they think that place is more appropriate than Helena's. I'll talk about that when we get in the church. From the 3rd station till the 9th station, we're not sure about the events, but they mark them and they say, 3rd station, the place where Jesus falls under the cross, under the heavy cross for the first time. 4th station, he meets with his mother, who stands by and sees him walking. 5th station, a man named Simon of Cyrene helps Jesus carry the cross. This is mentioned in the Bible, just doesn't say where. 6th station, a woman named Veronica comes and wipes out the sweat of Jesus' face, not mentioned in the Bible, including the name Veronica, which is basically a traditional name. It comes from 2 words. Vera in Greek means truth, icon, image. The true image of Jesus' face came on that handkerchief that she used to wipe, and then that handkerchief might it wear until it's in St. Peter's Church in Rome, right? St. Peter's?
Ah,
Yeah.
yes, I saw it.
And so that's a tradition. 7th century, 7th station, Jesus falls under the cross for the 2nd time. 8th station, Jesus meets the girls of Jerusalem, who cries when they see him going after the cross, and he says, don't cry for me, cry for Jerusalem, which is mentioned in the Bible. And then 9th station and on, all in the complex of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So that's when we go and we'll keep pointing. This is 1st station, 2nd, 3rd, and so on. You know more or less the events that happened in 1st station. And last, before we start Via Dolorosa, why would the Romans bother so much to take Jesus and go through the whole thing of crowns and purple gowns and heavy cross and crossing and carrying and